Croeso Tin Roast, Ceredigion. Welcome to Tin Roast in Ceredigion. Tin Roast is the home of Jane Blank, the author of the Nanteos novels. It's an early 1800s Welsh farmhouse with stone walls and Welsh slate roof, and it has what was originally the barn, which is now being used as a stable, and it has the pony shed, would have been originally, now used as a tack room, and also the all-important Tulk Mochin, the pigsty, as would originally have been. So Jane wrote the dipping pool, Nanteos dipping pool here, over the last 2 years. So let's go in and have a chat with Jane, and she can tell you a bit more about it. Hello Jane.
Hello Jeremy, and thank you very much for that introduction. Croeso. Welcome to our home everybody, and diolch yn fawr iawn for the wonderful invitation to join you in your festival. Very much looking forward to joining you on Saturday, and llongyfarchiadau, how great to, even in these difficult times, to be putting on, Dale, Richards and the team, wonderful team out there, be putting on this festival for Celtic nations. So here we are, as Jeremy said, 1840, little farm out on the wastes, and a mile and a half from the Welsh coast, and as you can see, wonderful big fireplace. This was the main feature of the farm at the time. The fire would have been lit and would have been on constantly, kept overnight as well, probably a turf fire, something like that, in the 1840s. We've got the crane left here from a little bit later than the original house probably, and they would have been a great cauldron lowered down into the open fire or lifted up, and that would have been on the boil all the time with various soup and scraps and little bits from the poor old pig outside chucked in there. So some of you might have been following my Instagram live readings at 6 o'clock here, 1 o'clock Eastern time, every Thursday from Plas Nanteos. Now Plas Nanteos, as Jean Dringer knows and Gwyneth Coldrow knows, is a most wonderful George II mansion, palatial mansion, just outside Aberystwyth. And it was built from 1730s to the 1750s, and it was inhabited by the Powell family for about 250 years. The last Powell didn't leave the house till the 1950s. And both of my stories are set at the mansion. And the first book, called The Shadow of Nanteos, is set over about a 15-month period where the elder brother has died and the younger brother takes over at Nanteos. And he was a clergyman, and his elder brother died without issue, without legitimate issue anyway, and he would never have expected to take over the mansion. So he does so in the 1750s, and my story follows what happens when the new mistress and the new master of Nanteos take over the house. It's based on historical fact, although I have changed facts. I have created alternative facts here and there in order to serve the purposes of my story, but it's based on a lot of research that I've done, wonderful archive on the Powell estate up in the National Library of Wales, and reading quite widely around the subject, and reading the letters and the documents and everything pertaining to the house from that period. So this book starts off on what was called then the Wastes, and some of you might have been following the wonderful Iolo Williams programmes that are set in the Cambrian Mountains, and Iolo calls the Cambrian Mountains the last wilderness in Wales, and I would agree with him, and all of you who've been lucky enough to go to the Pumlimon range, the area around Alive, up from Machynlleth, right the way down to Devil's Bridge, right the way down, then you can drop down to the coastal area around Aberystwyth. you will probably agree that it is like an upland desert. And at this period in the 18th century, that whole area was called the Wild West of Wales. And it was very bleak and very lonely. But what pulled people up there and what made it valuable was the ore and the lead deposits that were up there that had been mined since pre-Roman times, and that very much were being fought over between the Crown, local landowners, and of course a wedding bobble, people like my ancestors, people like Jean Ginger's ancestors, and many of you who have ancestors who did leave Wales in the 18th century and the 19th century to go to the New World. Many of you will have ancestors from the Tregaron region, from the Aberaeron region, Aberystwyth region, and particularly my second book, which has just been published by Alolva, was published last month. I'm very, very pleased to say it was the best-selling novel in Wales in September, the month it came out, so I'm absolutely thrilled about that. It would be nice if I could carry that on until Christmas. So the second book in particular looks at the lives not just of the Powell family in Nanteos, but it also looks at the lives of the people who laboured on their estates. So basically our ancestors, the hatters, the weavers, the fishing folk, the small farmers, the people in the mills, the people working in the ore industry, women and men and children in the most terrible conditions up in the mountains of the Cambrians in West Wales. So both books start out on those mountains, which is known as the Welsh Desert or the Celtic Desert. And the first book, The Shadow of Nanteos, starts in October, and what we see right at the very beginning is the landscape depicted, and into the landscape then comes a coach, and in that coach are the new younger son William Powell and his wife Elizabeth Powell, who have inherited the mansion after the sudden death of their brother, who has no legitimate child. And I'd like to just read you the very beginning, chapter 1 from The Shadow of Nanteos. Save you a bit of time if you ever do buy the book. And it depicts really what the landscape was like. The metal cage squeaks and groans in the wind. Suspended from a pole at the crossroads, the highest point on the road from Devil's Bridge, it twists slowly on its chain. Through the bars a skull stares out, eyes long gone, the fine teeth leer. In the pass below, a coach with outriders and a laden wagon seems hardly to move against the dark bulk of the mountain. The wind is a constant moan that is by now hardly consciously heard by the travellers, but its presence is felt as a low, pernicious anxiety. The rain has failed to fall, but threatens still in the layers of grey sky. The land here is desecrated by the pits and lumps of lead mining, its contours misshapen by heaps of slag and winding gear, its natural colours blackened by the tear of a conduit, a deep shaft's mouth. Sometimes a long grey structure disturbs the rough moorland, smoke rising feebly from each gable end. Here and there a small cottage has carved out a patch of sickly green, a circle of cultivation against the rust of bracken. So right at the beginning, the very first sentence, we are at the scaffold. And these scaffolds, I'm sure that's the case in many countries, were at crossroads and often in out-of-the-way places. So people would process up to the scaffold to see the public hanging, the public strangling, the public humiliations. But this same crossroads features in both of the books at the beginning. And just as we see in the beginning of The Shadow of Nanteos, the family crossing this waste, coming out of this bleak situation, and then down into the valley and to Nanteos for the first time. And we see the contrast there, and I'll read you that in a moment. So in this book, in The Dipping Pool, we see Calan Mai, so that's a spirit night. It's the May holiday, right at the end of May, where the people would be celebrating and making rites. Some people call it the dark arts, other people call it celebrating life, would be out there and they would be blessing the crops and they would be trying to bring good luck and good fortune on the beasts on which they so depended for the following summer. So here we are in the second book and we're out in the same atmosphere there, and the people, again, they're passing this what would be called the crogbren, where people were hung on the scaffold, and they would be then meeting the dancers in the dark. But now they can see the great bonfires, just make out the crowds surrounding them. With a new energy, the people turn their backs on the hanging man and make their way towards the light. Before they reach the great fires, there are dancers in the dark. The old cruths and harps of the strangers play harmonies and rhythms not of these mountains. Wooden boards have been laid, and the women of the travelling people, the gypsies, up from the camp at Tregaron, stamp at them with their clogs. They wear their long hair loose, their clothes colourful even in the torchlight, skirts sewn with coins. Though their dancing has a little of the travelling fair to it, the ribbon flicking, the high-pitched whoops and shouts, it is unfamiliar to many on the hill tonight. The women's feet stay in contact with the ground. They do not skip and reel, but swirl and stamp. They rap the ground sharply with their steel toe caps, like ewes stamping a warning. Their arms curl above their heads. Some clap and sing in their strange language with hard nasal voices. Authority wraps around them in a thick perfume as they lift their wide skirts high, seeming to be without shame. Even their knees are visible in the torchlight as they spin. Okay, so here the people of Werin have joined the gypsies up from the camps at Tregaron to have their rites out on the mountain, where the beasts, the bullocks, are driven alive through to the space between two big bonfires in order to cleanse them and bring good luck. Okay, so this book was published in 2015. I'm very pleased to say it was Waterstone's Wales Book of the month after it was published, and it went on to be one of the best-selling Welsh books that particular Christmas. These are particularly good books for Christmas. I've got lots of scenes set in the mansion between October, so we've got the old All Hallows Eve is being celebrated. Then we've got Christmas at the mansion, Christmas at the wonderful Llanbadarn Church near Aberystwyth. Then we've got the rites at Boxing Day, St Stephen's Day, Stephen's Day, and then we've got the New Year rites, the wassailing, and then we've got the wonderful 12th night party that is picked up in the dipping pool. So the 12th night party was a particularly dangerous evening, just as there was a lot of danger when they were out doing their rituals on the mountains. So everything seemed to involve blood or some sort of ritual sacrifice or symbolic sacrifice or some sort of danger. So for instance, what they would enjoy to do on Boxing Day was to hunt squirrels. What they would enjoy to do on 12th night was to have a party where it was the Lord of Misrule, where basically there was anarchy for a night. So they played a dangerous game in which the families, these fine families, would swap places and join together in a sort of social way with their servants. And so the boundaries, the social boundaries, the cultural boundaries were broken for that one night only, and mistress could dance with servant, servant could dance with master. So these series of books are based on my historical research about the very famous powerful family of Nanteos. And some of you might have heard of the Nanteos Cup, which is thought by some to be the Holy Grail, and which is now, after it was stolen, safely lodged for us to see behind glass in the National Museum of Wales, National Library of Wales up in Aberystwyth. But I have bent the facts. I've killed some people who didn't die. I've introduced people who didn't exist. People have fallen in love that might not have fallen in love with real in real life, but I couldn't resist it. I've had a lot of fun. I wrote most of this second book here upstairs in my desk, on my desk, overlooking the fields to the back, and part of the book in the wonderful Nanteos mansion itself that I was lucky to be able to use as we were having building work done on our little farm. So I've thoroughly enjoyed my time writing these two books. There might be a third book in the offing, I'm not sure. I know Jindra is being very persuasive on her side. There's also a possibility that I might like to write from a male protagonist point of view if there is going to be a third book. I have left things open. There are a few mysteries at the end of the book for the reader to themselves make up in their own mind what might well have happened, and also to allow me to further explore the story in the future. So I'd just like to say thank you so much for joining me, and I wish you the very best of luck for your wonderful festival, and see you on Saturday. Diolch yn fawr iawn i Dale a'r tîm, Dale Richards a'r tîm. Diolch i Ian Samways a phawb, a boblwch i chi gyd allan yn America, a dwi'n gobeithio bod chi'n mwynhau yr wyl yn enfawr. Diolch yn fawr iawn.